Hello, everyone. This is Sandy Anastasi. I'm here to talk to you about my Psychic Development Level 3 of the Anastasi system. And I'm so glad to see everyone here on the call. Lots of you could make it. And I have a feeling over the next few minutes we're going to be getting some more sign-ups. I am getting a little echo on the call. So I'm thinking, oh, there it went. The echo is now gone. Thank you. That's my wonderful IT person, Trish, who is really on top of everything. Thank you, Trish. The slide that you see up here, an overview of the Anastasi system of Psychic Development 3, shows the first 5 of the books in my series. And that goes right up into the channeling and mediumship, which are levels 4 and 5 and 6, which is in process, folks. Look for my level 6 book if you're in the process of studying this with me already. Look for my level 6 book, probably coming out towards the end of the year. It is at work right now. If we go to the next slide, I call what we're talking about tonight and what we're going to actually be involved with at the end of this month. I am going to be teaching the Psychic Development Level 3 in Tampa, and that's going to be on March 23rd and 24th. So if any of you who are listening to this webinar tonight want to see me in person and have the fun of studying with me in person, I'm going to be at the Sheraton Tampa West Shore on March 24th and 25th. And we're on the second slide here, level 3, tools and toys. Okay. And if you look at that level 3 slide, it is going to give you an overview of what I call tools and toys of the system. Tools and toys. Why do I call it this? You know, when we first get involved with psychic development in levels 1 and 2, we're first learning to meditate. We're learning to balance and center and to get a real handle on our abilities for telepathy, for empathy, and all of that occurs in level 1. In level 2, which we talked about the last month that we had this last webinar, in level 2 we actually have this ability to develop the ability to see auras and to feel auras. So once we get into level 2, we're now really starting to put the whole ball of wax together. We're even doing health scans, and one of my favorite people, Joe O'Connell, I think is on our call tonight. And in my newsletter this month, I had a great editorial that talked about an experience that Joe posted to my Facebook, where he was able to use his remote viewing and his health scan combination to be able to help somebody in the emergency room that he was working in a hospital. So it's really nice to see that kind of thing being applied in the real world. Okay, so I'm very happy to see all of those things that are being done. Meanwhile, as we go into level 3, we've now got the beginnings of our psychic development, and we're at the point where we're really wanting to apply it and to work with some tools. And as a practicing psychic who has been doing readings for over 30 years, I first started working with the tools of the trade, so to speak, when I realized that doing a straight, that's what we used to call it, psychic reading, where you just sit opposite somebody and you just tell them what you get from them, okay? That's very impressive, but if your client is very closed, you know, there they are, they've got their arms crossed, they've got their head down, they've got their legs crossed, they're blocking themselves from you, and that can be very frustrating because you know that you could give them information, but they're shutting you out. And I learned very early on that when you pull out some of the psychic tools and toys, that once you say 2 or 3 words that are very accurate, and you're just using the toys to be able to do this, all of a sudden the person's boundaries drop, they open up, the arms uncrossed, the legs uncrossed, they're now listening to you, and now you could jump into that straight psychic reading and use your telepathy and your empathy and all the things you've learned in psychic developments level 1 and 2, and also that we will be learning in 4, 5, and 6. You'll be able to use all of those things, and sometimes the tool is just the thing that you needed to cut the ice, okay? So I don't know why our slides are not changing here. I'm not sure what's going on here. So let me just see if I can see why we're not moving our slides on. Okay, we should be already on to the third slide. And that isn't happening yet. Trish, would you come online for a moment so that we can, you and I can find out why the slides aren't changing?
Okay, Sandy. Which slide are we supposed to be on?
Well, we're the second slide, which was an overview of the Anastasi system. Okay, we're still on slide 1 here.
Okay, I think there's something wrong with your screen because we're on the second one.
Okay, I'll tell you what then. I won't look at my screen. Oh, it just changed for me. Whatever you did, keep doing it. But I'll just assume you're changing them, okay?
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And everyone, you just got to hear Trish. So aren't we glad that she's taking care of this for me, because I am technologically challenged. On the other hand, it works just fine for me in just about every other way. So we're good. We're a great team. Okay, so the next slide, we're looking at the individual tools and toys now. So flip this one more time, Trish. And the next slide, here we go. You're going to see my list of tools and toys. When we get into Psychic Development Level 3, I just let it all hang out, and we have fun. We do so many things. We learn to do so many things that really impress your client or your partner because they're so simple, and you can get so much information from them. We talk about psychometry, and we talk about pendulums. We talk about scrying, which is the old-fashioned term for crystal gazing. We talk about radionics, which is one way of using a pendulum. And we also talk about divination using a pendulum. We talk about automatic writing. And we talk about dreaming or dream walking and astral traveling. We also talk about psychic protection and about a little bit astrology, numerology, tarot, and so many other things. So in Psychic Development Level 3, I'm going over all of these tools that we associate with psychics. Now, by now, since you've been studying your Psychic Development Level 1 and 2, you know that you really don't need to have all of those tools to be able to utilize your psychic abilities. As a matter of fact, you're going to do better with these tools because you already have developed your psychic abilities to the level that they're at. A lot of these tools you just can't really use properly unless you've got those other abilities, the empathy, the telepathy, the ability to remote view already in your toolbox. That's the way I think of that. Okay, if we go to the next slide, we're now talking about psychometry. Let's go through these tools and these toys one at a time and take a look at what they are. When I teach my Psychic Development Level 3, I try to put a lot of emphasis, especially initially, on psychometry. As a matter of fact, when students first walk into my room, I will have hidden 3 envelopes, and they will be long-distance viewing or remote viewing what's in those envelopes. And so I kind of get them started on the focus of psychometry by remote viewing. I know that sounds a little odd, but they're remote viewing to see where the envelopes are, what's in the envelope, and literally pull it out through their remote viewing and, feel it and say, what is this object? So there's this way of introducing the psychometry through remote viewing before they ever even walk into the classroom. And of course, once the student walks into the classroom, we spend a lot of time initially talking about and learning how to do psychometry. Psychometry, as you can see here, is the act of reading or tuning into the vibration and energy of an object. And it uses the psychic abilities of clairsentience as well as empathy. So, and of course this little graph here shows how it works. But the most important thing is that, first off, if you're a practicing psychic, it is inevitable that there will be a time in your career that someone's going to bring an object to you or a photograph to you and say, what can you tell me about this, and drop it in your hand. Okay? So psychometry is definitely one of the tools that I want to make sure is in your toolbox before you leave my classroom, because it's something every psychic is going to, at some time in their career, have experience with. Now, the other reason that I like people to learn psychometry is so that they have a better handle on something that they are already doing. You see, when you sit down in that chair that you're sitting in right now, if somebody was sitting in that chair earlier in the day that was very antsy and couldn't sit still, or maybe had a sore shoulder, it's very possible that you're picking up their anxiety, or that you're picking up their sore shoulder. Okay? So that's a form of psychometry. You see, we human beings psychometrize everything around us without almost even recognizing we're doing it. And now let me direct your attention to just what this vibration is. If the first line up here is your vibration. Well, in order to psychometrize an object, you drop your vibration until it matches the vibration of the object. That's the connection. And since an object doesn't meet you halfway, once you've made that connection, you totally merge with the object. Well, of course, once we begin to develop our psychic abilities, especially as we become more sensitive and more receptive, we begin to psychometrize almost every room we walk into, almost everything we sit in, almost everything we touch. Unless we're consciously aware that things aren't us, it's very easy for us to begin to think that vibrations outside of us belong to us when they don't. So it's important to understand psychometry, and of course the need for protection in psychometry, just as when you're reading an aura, you put psychic protective gloves on when you read an object. It's the same thing. Many of you will have seen pictures and television shows where a psychic is working with the police, and they'll hand the psychic an object of the person who was kidnapped or abducted. And obviously that psychic is going to hold on to that object, and then we'll get visions or glimpses or feelings about where the person is. That tool that they are using when they do that is psychometry. It sounds like it's a very hocus-pocus, very difficult thing to do, and in reality it is really quite simple to do. And there's a great likelihood that every one of you who are listening to this call are already using that skill right now. So we spend, probably a couple of hours studying this in the first part of our Psychic Development Level 3, so that we really have a good handle on it and we understand it. And incidentally, one of the things that I do with my students, and I suggest you do this at home, when I first work with people with psychometry, I don't put an object they can recognize into their hand. I have them put an object into a big envelope, and I put all the envelopes into a bin and have them randomly pick the envelope. Because what I find is that your mind, your intellect can get in the way. For example, if someone hands you a key, your intellect immediately says, oh, what does the key open? And so you want to imagine what the key opens. Well, there's a great likelihood that the person who hands you the key, when you're doing a psychic reading for them, already knows what the key opens. They're not interested in that. They want to know something about the person who owns the key. Okay? So if you're sitting there saying, well, I see this little square box and it's in the back of a drawer, they're saying, well, yeah, I know exactly about that box in the back of the drawer. I want to know about the person who gave me the key and the box that's in the back of the drawer. Okay? So it's important when you're first learning to do psychometry that you don't allow the appearance of the object to get in the way of your being able to read the vibration on the object. Okay? Oh, and there's so much more. When you study psychometry, you learn that objects, just like people, have memories, and those memories can go back a long, long time. And so it's possible, for example, with an antique, that you could track the existence and the lifespan of an object all the way back to its multiple owners. There are just so many stories I would love to tell you. I had one client hand me a ring that had been worn through his family for 7 generations, but including him. But the person I picked up on the ring most strongly was a great-great-great-grandfather. He wasn't the first owner of the ring, but he was the most dominant personality to have worn the ring. And so, you know, that's an important consideration, that when you pick up a piece of jewelry or an item of clothing and you wear it, that that individual who had such a dominant personality, who owned that in the past, could now be affecting your personality. That's an important consideration. You know, did you inherit someone from somebody, and when you started wearing it, did you start to become more like them? I've known people who took over somebody's bed and began to sleep in it after that person died and came down with the same illness. So be aware that psychometry is, you know, when we talk about reading the vibration on an object, we are also looking at this entire field of understanding that objects have vibration as well, not just people, not just living beings or animals. So that object is going to have a memory, and it can have a very strong effect on you because essentially it may have been charged by a previous owner, etc., etc. This is one reason why when my tarot students say, oh, my grandmother left me a deck of tarot cards, can I read with that? And I shudder and I say, of course not. You can keep it as a memento of your grandmother, but certainly do not read with it unless you want to get gray hair, get a fat belly, and start talking with her accent. Okay, so much for psychometry. It is wonderful to learn to read the vibration on the object, but we also gain this tremendous understanding through investigating psychometry as to the whole concept of everything in our universe being vibration, and all those vibrations being able to be affected by one another. We also learn when we're studying psychometry how to charge an object. We learn how to change an object's vibration. We learn how to identify an object that might have been magically or ritually charged, because those can be objects that can have a very strong effect on you indeed. For example, if you snagged something from the Egyptian pyramid that you visited and now have it sitting on your mantle, it could be affecting everyone in your household, and you might not even recognize that. So that's important to kind of study that and get a real understanding on what you're looking at when you're dealing with the vibrations on an object. Let's take a look at the next slide. We also talk about pendulums in our class. And now, pendulums are fun. I love them. What I have found over the years is that my students will resonate to one or more of these tools. And everyone loves psychometry. I haven't met a single person yet who didn't. And just about everybody loves pendulums too. I actually did meet one person, and he's actually one of my certified teachers, who could not make that pendulum move. Not only that, but if I went and I pushed it, the darn thing would go to total stillness within about half a second. You know, how did he do this? And finally it occurred to me, I asked him, were you an airline pilot? And he said, well, actually I flew when I was in the service, and I landed on aircraft carriers in the water. I said, okay. It was like he had a gyroscope in his mind. He was going to always keep that pendulum straight. So after a while, he began to work with it, and he was able to learn to make that pendulum move also. Folks, just for the record, you are always the one who's moving the pendulum. It's not like there's a ghost or something that moves the pendulum. Your tiny muscles in your fingers move the pendulum. So the difference is, though, there are two ways of working with a pendulum. One is radionics, which isn't psychic at all. It's just testing energy fields. And the other is actually very psychic. It's dowsing using the pendulum, i.e. for divination, where you're asking yes or no questions of your guides. And when you're using the pendulum psychically, yes, your little muscles in your fingers are still moving the pendulum, but it's your unconscious mind that's controlling those and moving it. So you're getting the information psychically and giving that information to the pendulum. So in class, we do learn both methods of using a pendulum, radionics and also the psychic use of it. You can make a pendulum out of anything that hangs that's weighted. My favorite pendulums are pendulums that will come to a point, like the one in the picture here. You'll notice that there's a little arrow showing a motion, a travel motion around it. Well, that arrow is for when you're using a pendulum for radionics. In radionics, they work with a pendulum that spins, and every single time you test something, it's like muscle testing. or kinesiology. Every time you test the energy field of something, you have to see which direction the pendulum is spinning each time you test it. And you test it just like it is shown in this picture. You hold the pendulum in one hand over the other hand, and as you're holding it, the pendulum will automatically move either clockwise or counterclockwise. Well, this particular time that you're doing your pendulum, if it spins clockwise today, clockwise, or for this moment, clockwise is yes, okay? Counterclockwise would be no. Now, when you use the pendulum for divination, whole different thing. You can either use the clockwise and counterclockwise motions if that's your favorite, but it would be consistent, yes and no. It would always be, for example, clockwise would always be yes. I prefer to use a back and forth motion, side to side, as a no, and a back and forth towards me and away from me as a yes, and then I use the circle as a maybe when I'm working with a pendulum. Now, I have to tell you that when I work with a pendulum for radionics, that's only testing an energy field. You're hanging the pendulum in the energy field of something and saying, is this good to eat? Or is this the right medication for this particular illness? And you'll get a proper answer every time, but you're not really asking this question of your guides or anything outside of yourself. You're asking the pendulum to test the energy field, which it does, and gives you the answer. And it'll give you that answer by either a clockwise or a counterclockwise spin. Now, when you get into down on the bottom, it can be used for things like finding lost objects, answering questions, telling the sex of a child. Now we're using the pendulum for divination. When we use a pendulum for divination, we are asking a question of something that's not energy-based. It's outside of ourselves. We're asking it of some discarnate entity, hopefully our guides, and therefore we need a complete array of protection when we use a pendulum for divination. So you see, when I teach divination, pendulum divining to my students, I go into quite a bit of detail as far as the protection that's used. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Let's go on to the next slide. This shows you what I was just talking about. Radionics is just the testing of an energy field, and divination is when we're calling on outside entities, our spirit guide, archangels, your higher self, to answer the question through the pendulum. So please be clear on which way you're using the pendulum. And the most common way, really, of using a pendulum is divination. When you use a pendulum using energy field testing or radionics, it's very much like dowsing. And if you've heard of dowsers, those are the people who will walk with, a set of sticks, and they hunt for usually oil, but water, but they could actually hunt for oil or just about anything else that's in the ground. They put that thought of what they want in their mind, and as they're walking, the rods will dip when it comes to that spot that you're going to find water. The key is holding the question in your mind and recognizing that you're testing the energy field for that thing you're holding in your mind. And when the energy field, when the rods detect the water, they dip. You could do the same exact thing with a pendulum. You could carry the pendulum over your yard, and when you got to that point where there was going to be water, the pendulum would start to move in that clockwise circle if that was yes for this time that you were doing it. Okay, so radionics, muscle testing, energy field testing does not involve anything psychic other than that it's utilizing your inborn ability to ask the question and then recognize the movement of the pendulum or the dowsing rods. Divination is a whole different story, because here you're throwing the question out to the greater universe, and frankly, anything could be coming by to snag your attention. And this is where I first get into things with my students, where I try to impress on them how very, very important psychic protection is. Let's look at the next slide. In this psychic protection, when we do divination work, I tell my students put themselves in the white light, then do the energy balloon that I teach in Psychic Development Level 1, then say a prayer. I have a prayer that I use, but any prayer that you work with will be fine. And then ask your higher self guides, archangels, for help. Now, I do, in my class, actually take my students through a guided visualization to meet their guides. So when we get to the point where we're calling on our guides, we have a method of actually making sure we have our guide and not an imposter. If you do not already know who your guide is, my suggestion is you only call on your higher self, because that part of yourself you're already in touch with. Okay? Once you've done these steps to create that protection, now you're ready to work on using your pendulum for divination, for asking your question. Okay, and I think I saw a bunch of hands going up there. I think now is a really good time for me to take a quick break and answer some of those questions. Okay, Lisa, do we have a hand that went up that wants to, that has a question?
I believe we do. Let's see if we can get right down here. Okay, Sharon, you're unmuted.
Hello.
Hello, Sharon.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for calling in. And now, what's your question?
My question is, I own several pieces of jewelry, necklace, a couple pendants that go on that necklace, a bracelet, some earrings. This woman was very beautiful and talented, but she passed away at 60 years old, and she had a bad blood disease. I mean, it was a type of disease that was developing for 20 years, 22 years, then she passed away. Now I'm afraid to wear it because of what you were just saying about picking up energy and even contracting a disease if you wear the jewelry. Or,
well, it certainly is possible. What I would do is, first off, I would not wear jewelry that belonged to someone else that I didn't really like and feel a very strong connection to both the piece of jewelry and the person. In other words, just the beauty of the piece wouldn't be enough for me. Okay? But there are clearing methods, and this is important to know about objects. You can clear an object of energy that it has collected that's like an emotional charge. You know, like if somebody has a momentary anger, you can clear an object of that using salt and water, or putting it under a tree, or running it under water. Any method you could use for clearing yourself, you could use for clearing the object. The thing is that if it was something which came on her for so many years, and she had that illness for so many years, that was a part of who she was, and that becomes part of the memory of the object. So the object doesn't just remember her, it remembers her as that vibration. So when you're wearing that, and how do you erase the memory of an object? You can't. It existed, okay? The only way you can erase the memory would be by putting another charge on top of that, which basically kind of brainwashes it, kind of seals it. And it's really interesting. I've known people who've actually taken an object and, using either magical means or the strength of their will and their projection, they've taken that object and completely shrouded it with energy that turns the original energy off. You follow what I'm saying? It's kind of like putting a raincoat over it. And when the oddest thing happens, all of a sudden they don't like the piece anymore.
Wow.
because now it has no memory at all. And it may very well be that the thing that attracted you to it to begin with was that you really did like this woman, and that she had a great personality, even though she also happened to have that illness. You see? Can you just, block out that illness? I think I would give that a try. I would certainly, though, pay attention, and if after wearing it you feel a certain way, or you have certain symptoms that don't feel right, I would just use it as something that I kept in my jewelry box and took out once in a while to look at. Or I would only
back
wear
to the person that gave it to me.
Yeah.
Although that person would probably be hurt, but I just,
or I would
worrying
only
me.
wear it once in a very, very great while. I have a pair of earrings that I got from my mother, and Lord knows she was my mother. They're something that I cherish because they came from her. But the last thing in the world I ever want to do is be like my mother. I didn't particularly like her. I loved her, didn't like her. So am I going to wear her earrings every single day? Of course not. I'd start feeling like her. I'd start acting like her. And nobody would like a short-tempered Sandy. You see my point.
Yes,
okay?
I see your point.
Now, if it was an object that the person only wore casually, it's not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something you only wear once in a blue moon, it's
Pretty much.
not an issue.
Pretty much, I do wear it once in a blue moon.
Yeah, I would say it's not an issue. And you could also, pick up a book on magic or something that talks about charging an object, or even in my book on Psychic Development 3, towards the end of the book, there is a set of instructions on how to clear an object and to clear a room, and you can apply those things to it to get off any of the excess energy. And then as far as the memory is concerned, you would basically use, there are techniques where you can use salt and water, the 4 elements, fire, earth, air, and water, to seal off and I would see it as a sealing off that part of the object that contained the illness.
Yeah, because I really admired the woman. She was a fantastically talented woman. I think I sing better now, since, and that's what I do. Part of the thing I do for a living is singing.
Well, and now see, that's the thing. If somebody picks up Sandy's tarot cards, they do a phenomenal reading, and so they want to use Sandy's tarot cards. But the next, like a week later, they want to dye their hair blonde. It just doesn't really work. When people first begin to recognize how important objects are, they always have like these moments of like, wow. When you start putting these things together, you're going to be amazed. Think of how many kids grow up wearing their older kids' hand-me-downs.
Oh yeah.
And then the parent wonders why they're all trying to be like the big brother or sister who always got into trouble. You know?
Well, what about a mirror? I also got her mirror because her husband wanted me to have it. It was a special antique mirror from her family.
Yeah.
And it also has, like a vanity table that I inherited, and, he wanted it to be going to somebody that would appreciate it, which I do. It still has the smell of like cherry tobacco in it, from that family history. And
and now when you're talking, yeah, we can spend a whole hour on this.
Yeah.
My friend. But think about it. You're going into an antique store here, and now we could go back, like that gentleman I mentioned with the ring. We could go back 9 generations, but the one 5 generations back was the one with the dominant personality. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but
it's hard. It's hard in this world not to, I have a lot of things that are antiques in this house, so I got all kinds of energies going all around me.
Right, and this is why I always say, it's not that you shouldn't have antiques or that you shouldn't take something that is a memento of someone who's passed that you love, but you should just be aware that this also carries the memory of that person. And if you're going to wear it or use it all the time, it may be something that you're going to want to do something to block those memories so that they don't affect your daily life, unless you truly want to bring that into your life. That's a different story. Okay?
You have to respect these objects because they have living memories.
That's right. They absolutely do, and they can. Now, they may not affect the environment as strongly as another human being would, but they definitely do have an effect on the environment. And, I'm seeing a lot of hands go up, so I want to take one more before I move on with my webinar.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Terry,
Hello. Sandy.
Yes, hello.
My question is this. Do you think, I have used a pendulum, a crystal pendulum. It looks exactly like the picture I saw. Do you think it's possible that subconsciously we force the pendulum to swing in the direction we want to see the answer?
Okay, I'm having a little bit of difficulty understanding you. I'm not sure whether we can turn your sound down a little bit so you have better projection.
Okay.
And talk a little, turn the sound down on your machine a little, but then talk a little louder.
Okay. Is that any better?
Yeah, you still have a hollow sound, but I can understand you better.
Okay. The question is, do you think we subconsciously make the pendulum swing in the direction of the answer we want to achieve, like a yes or no?
Absolutely, Terry. We most certainly do, okay? This is one of the other things, and thank you for bringing that, obvious but not so obvious question up, because everybody else would have been embarrassed to ask it, but it's something we need to be aware of. This is the reason why it's important to never ask emotionally based questions for yourself. Okay? And I'm going to ask if you would mute your mic, because I'm getting feedback from your mic. So mute your mic while I'm giving the answer, and then I'll give you a chance to ask something else before I close back down again, okay? So Lisa, can you mute her, but remember where she is? Okay. When you're asking a question, if it has a strong emotional impact, inevitably on you, you are not going to be able to give yourself an honest answer. So, for example, if I'm needing to sell my house and it's really getting down to the wire and I have to sell it within the next month, guess what? I take out my pendulum. Am I going to sell the house this month? Am I going to sell the house this month? Well, no matter how much protection I put around me, I'm going to be blocking off the true answer from my guides, because that feeling of I need is a feeling of constriction. It constricts their information, and now I'm either going to be getting, oh yes, because I'm feeding the answer I want, or I'm going to be getting, oh no, because I'm so frightened, I'm projecting my fear. Either way, I'm not getting an accurate answer. So it's a really good idea to develop a friendship with another person who works with a pendulum. And when you have a really important emotional question to ask for yourself, you let your friend ask it. Don't you ask it. And when your friend has an important emotional question they need to ask, they'll call you and you ask it for them. Okay? So just what do you do when you're working with a pendulum for divination? What do you use it for? You use it for things where there isn't a real strong emotional focus. I can ask questions for my friend. I can ask questions about something that could be happening a year from now, or things that I'm just playing with in my mind. What would be a good way to handle a certain business option? But I'm not going to ask something like, is my husband cheating on me? Because obviously there's no time that's not going to be an emotionally based question. You got it? Lisa, unmute her again, please.
Tools such as tarot cards?
Yeah, it works. This works exactly like the tarot cards.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Do not be asking questions for yourself unless they are things you have no emotional attachment to.
Thank you.
Don't you love it? You're very welcome. And thank you for asking that question. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask before we hang up on you?
Well, I did, but Lisa kind of thought it wasn't an appropriate question.
Okay, but you can write it on my Facebook.
Okay.
Okay? So,
all right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me get back to the next slide. I mentioned that a big part for me of when I'm teaching my students how to protect themselves when using a pendulum is not just putting the white light in the energy balloon and saying the prayer, but also, once they're in all that protection, asking for help from their life guide and their protector guide. And so, of course, I wanted to throw this slide in here, which just gives you a little insight into how I see the universe. I think of this almost like a ladder. You might also want to think of it like layers of an onion. The point is that your physical body, see, look at this bottom, the very bottom rung here is your physical body, and on that physical body is going to be the physical plane, and anything that you see, feel, and touch in a physical sense is on that physical plane. The next level up is your emotional body, and that would be when we feel an aura, when we feel the vibration on an object, that's where we're feeling it. And the next level up, where it says mind, that's where telepathy would work. The next level up, the intuitive feeling nature, that's where you get a feeling from your guide or your higher self that just comes as an impulse where you know you need to do something but you don't know why. You just have a strong inner urge, okay? And then, of course, the next plane up is the higher self itself, and the next plane up would be your higher guides and helpers, which would probably be where your life guide and your protector guide are located, okay? Now, you can have guides on any plane of existence, right down to the physical. One of these days I'll do a webinar on guides. We've done many chats on them. They're phenomenal. Those people who've been looking at your guides, look at the schematic, and also remember that even above higher guides and helpers, there are more planes of consciousness. They don't end here. And there can be guides coming from all different levels depending what you're open to receiving, okay? But when I'm talking about connecting with your higher self, here you are all the way down in the physical, and I'm talking about reaching all the way up, like 4 or 5 planes up, to make that connect to your higher self, and even higher to make that connection to your higher guides to help you in getting your information. Now, what happens if you actually do the exercise, and it's in my book, if you actually do the exercise, the full exercise for protection, including working with your higher self and your guides, you're bringing your consciousness so far above the physical, everyday, gee, I want, I need, I'm concerned, I'm worried, I'm fearful. You're actually bringing your consciousness to a higher level. And so, back to answering the last question again, there are some personal questions that if you really can make this connect and do the right protection, you may really be able to keep yourself objective enough to get those answers, okay? But I would still have a friend double check me. Okay, let's look at the next slide. There are other common divination tools as well, okay, and I'm showing some of these on the next slide. My favorite is automatic writing. Automatic writing has 3 different kinds. There's the inspired kind of writing that basically so many writers do today. The inspired writing is usually concepts that spirit guides, or you're tapping into the Akashic records and you're getting information conceptually and write, oh wow, this is such a wonderful idea, I have to write about it. And then you go and you just write. Anytime you've written something and it just flowed, that's inspired writing. Okay, it just flows. You don't even have to stop and think. It was like the best thing you ever wrote. That's inspired writing. And that doesn't really require any kind of protection because, frankly, it was only inspired. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form controlled or dictated. The second kind of automatic writing is something that I do not teach to my students, nor do I recommend anyone doing it. However, I know there are people out there who do. And this would be somebody who goes into trance channeling or mediumship and writes, okay? I do not teach my students to go into trance at all. Why? Because I think that it's very dangerous. I think too many people who have done either channeling or mediumship, and I'll talk about this more when I do a webinar in the future for my level 4. The thing is, too many people have gone into trance to do channeling or mediumship, and over a period of time, they're channeling, they're bringing something through them that's not themselves, that actually takes their body over and does, in this case, the writing for them. And when you do that, you're bringing something in that has a different vibratory level than you. It's caustic to your own circuitry, and it will wear you out. Most people who are trance channels, like Edgar Cayce and Jane Roberts, who channeled the Seth, the entity called Seth, most people who do trance mediumship or trance channeling die young. I want my students to live long lives, so I do not teach this, although I do certainly recommend it as a valid psychic form. And I do know personally a few people who do trance channeling and trance mediumship, and very, very few of them stay healthy and live long lives. And so I just want to leave you with that thought. The third kind of automatic writing is actually guided writing, and this is the writing that I teach to my students. It's where we teach you to allow to fully protect yourself, just as we did with the pendulum when we used the pendulum for divination. But we teach our students to allow your spirit guide to guide your hand, not to take it over and move it, okay? And it's interesting because so many times when you're writing in this way, you'll actually hear the words in your head even while your hand is feeling like it wants to make these circles or write this script. And it almost feels like somebody's guiding your hand. It feels like it's happening from outside of you as opposed from inside of you. And that's why this is so much safer to do. So mostly in my students, you're going to find the combination of inspired writing and guided writing. Scrying or crystal gazing, another type of psychic skill using a tool which requires a strong protection. I like to do automatic writing and scrying together, just like Nostradamus did. That's what he did. You know, he was an astrologer. He did automatic writing and he did scrying. He used those three tools, and look at the phenomenal information he got. Some of that information still holds true today. So we know that these tools work. We've seen them work all through history. Scrying is when you gaze into an object, and we most commonly think of this as a crystal ball, but it doesn't have to be a ball. You know, you can scry. That's why I like to call it scrying, not just crystal gazing. I scry in the bathroom floor in the middle of the night, and I see what's going to happen in my life the next morning. I scry in the clouds. I see faces. I see forms. I scry in the bubbles in the hot tub. I scry in the stones of a stream. I scry in the bark of a tree. So it doesn't have to be a crystal that you are using as your gazing object. It's fun if you like to play. You can make a scrying mirror by painting the back of a concave bowl, a flat black paint, and then gazing into the bowl with water in it. You can also, there's a very famous woman on Long Island that I grew up with called the Egg Lady. She would take the whites of an egg and stir them into a bowl of water, and it gave her the same feeling of a crystal ball looking into it, and she would scry using that. So there's so many different objects you can scry or crystal gaze into. It doesn't have to be a crystal. If you want to use a crystal ball, it doesn't have to be a giant, 5-inch crystal ball. It can be a crystal ball that's as big as a marble or as small as a marble. It could be a flat crystal that has depth to it that draws you in. I have a couple of flat pieces of clear quartz that really have lots of occlusions in them. They're beautiful. I teach my students how to choose a scrying implement, as well as how to actually do this. And it's interesting that there is a definite technique to crystal gazing, and it is very similar to when we look at an aura. We don't look directly at the object when we're looking at an aura. We look, we use sort of an altered vision in order to see that aura. We don't look directly at the object because it's the rods of our eyes that are going to be actually seeing that aura, not the cones. Well, the same thing happens with scrying. We don't look directly at the object. We let our eyes go soft focus, and that's when objects are going to start to appear. So I first teach my students how to recognize when they're already scrying, because all of us do this. It's a natural human ability. And then I teach them to protect and to consciously tap into that ability. When we scry unconsciously, there's no danger because nobody knew we were going to do it. There's nobody on the other side waiting there to jump on us. But when we scry consciously with purpose, then we need protection. Because in the same way that when we're using a pendulum for divination, or when we're using automatic writing to connect with someone on the other side to give us information, when we're scrying, we're opening up and we're saying, okay, here's my question, just show me whatever. So you could be seeing anything. And let's look at the next slide, because this is a good time to bring this up. Ouija boards, when you use any of these tools without protection, essentially you're working with a Ouija board. There was a really fun movie way back in the 90s. It was called Witchboard. And you can probably buy that or on Amazon, or even find a copy of it on YouTube somewhere. And I wanted to emphasize that the special effects are a little over the top on that movie, but the storyline is accurate. Okay, I definitely do not recommend Ouija boards. I think if you have kids and your kids want to play with a Ouija board, you should take that Ouija board away from them. Teenagers are so open. It's just not a recommended tool. It helps you to open psychically without having any degree of protection. However, if you insist on using a Ouija board, please protect yourself the same way I taught you to protect, or we'll teach you if you get my book and read it thoroughly through. or take my classes, which are available incidentally on CD, on cassette tape, as well as on Blu-ray now. So there's no excuse for having no excuse for not having the ability to protect yourself when you're using these things. If you're going to use a Ouija board, which I frankly find very slow, so they're really a waste of time. Once you really know how to do this, you can do it far faster using automatic writing or a pendulum or crystal gazing. This is just very slow. But if you really want to use one, do the same protection you do for a pendulum and for automatic writing and for crystal gazing, and you'll be safe. Okay. But take them away from your kids until they have learned how to protect themselves. Okay. In the movie Witchboard, it tells a story about a girl who gets basically who attracts a spirit into her environment and into herself that creates emotional chaos in her life. And here's a concept I just want to introduce to you at this point. Just like money is the currency of power and exchange here on the physical plane, on the next plane up, the currency is energy. And we human beings have an enormous amount of energy trapped here in the physical plane. And the easiest way of getting us to generate and release that energy is through a strong emotion. And so if you're using a pendulum or a Ouija board or automatic writing or a crystal ball without protection, you have a potential of, instead of attracting your guide, attracting a discarnate entity who is basically accumulating the power tool of his plane, i.e. energy. And the best way for him to gather energy is by getting you emotionally upset about something. And so in the movie Witchboard, the first thing the entity that comes in through the Ouija board tells her, the first couple of things are really true. You know, she lost a ring. It told her where to find it. Somebody was going to call. It told her when the person was going to call and who they were. So the first few things it told her were true to lead her into trusting. And then once it had snagged her with trusting, it began to feed her information, which made her very emotional and easily upset. And the first thing you know, she was interacting with people and in ways that were creating all kinds of hardship in her life and in their life and creating emotional turmoil, which this entity could now feed off of. I just have simplified the story, but it's a really good thing to put in the back of your mind, because just like there are good people on the other side, there are also bad people on the other side. And if you remember that the thing that we always have to offer to anyone on the other side is our energy, okay? So you want to give your energy to the people you love through prayer and through good feelings. You don't want to give the energy to people who are power mongers on the other side any more than you would want to give that energy to people who are power mongers here in the physical plane, right? So just remember that and think about it that way, and you'll never be tempted to try and do these things without protection, okay? And if you do get told something by anyone, whether it's a psychic or whether it's your own tool that you're using, that's very emotionally upsetting, you're going to know to step back and re-look at that and say, did that person scarf up on some energy? Is that what they were looking at for? Or, you know, let's double check this before I get upset about it, is what I'm saying, okay? I think now is another time when I should stop and take a quick question. Lisa, do we have a hand up?
There are no hands up.
Okay, I think I've just shocked everybody. Okay.
I think so.
I'll give you folks a few moments to think as I move on. Let's move to the next slide, more tools and toys. Now, in my class, these are things I do not teach simply because they would take a class all by themselves. But I want to mention them because these are phenomenal tools, and if any of them interest you, I want to encourage you to get involved with them. Rune stones, if you have Norse heritage, Norway, Sweden, if you're of Norse heritage, English also, you may find the rune stones very attractive. Different cultures all over the planets have their own version of rune stones. I know the Africans have some, the American Indians had some. They don't go by the name of rune stones. I don't know the name, but they're similar. They use They use different symbols, but they respond the same way. They're definitely, runestones are easy to learn because they're simple symbols and yet can take a lifetime of study to master. Much like numerology down the bottom of my list, very easy to learn. I think everyone should study numerology, and yet you could be studying it all of your life and still be growing and learning from it. Tarot cards, another tool that's quite easy to learn, and by the way, I did write a tarot book. It's called the Tarot Reader's Workbook. I highly recommend it. It's easy, and yet it's also in-depth, so you can read it both ways. But the tarot cards are quite easy to learn, and yet you can spend a lifetime working with them. And for somebody who wants an alternative tool to take their psychic abilities to maybe a new level that a tool will help them to get to, I strongly recommend tarot cards. Palmistry is interesting because, most palmists I know, they grab your hand and they look at the lines and they start to tell you about the lines, and then 2 seconds later they're looking off into space and they're reading your aura. So palmistry often gets confused with psychometrizing the aura and doing a health scan or a psychic reading by touching the aura, like we learned in Psychic Development Level 2. But palmistry in and of itself is an art. Every line and every mark on the palm has its own meaning. It, again, is easy to learn the basics of this, very difficult and lifelong study to learn it in depth. Tea leaf and coffee ground readings. I've played with all these things myself, folks. I love these toys. And the tea leaf reading, since I am an astrologer, here's a little hint to those of you listening who are astrologers. If you empty the cup and then turn it right side up again and put the handle on the left and make the handle the ascendant, well, where all the grounds fall, those can be looked at as planets in the chart. Haha, so now you have a way, if you're an astrologer, of being able to read tea leaves and coffee grounds, and nobody will know the difference because you can do it very accurately. It's a lot of fun. And yet there are books on tea leaf and coffee ground readings, and if you do it the way it's meant to be done, it's almost like scrying again, where you're looking into the cup and the different things, the formations that you see in that cup all mean something different. Okay? Again, simple to learn, a lifetime of study to get really good at it. Graphology, I have in here. Graphology is the art of reading handwriting. And I have this in here, although it technically is not a psychic science. Isn't that interesting? How you write definitely tells, it's admissible in court, definitely tells whether you're spiritual or whether you're an everyday person, whether you're good at completing things. It tells your personality very, very well. But you can also read graphology when you touch that writing psychically, and then you're psychometrizing it. So somebody who's both a graphologist and a psychometrist can do a phenomenal job on graphology. And of course, I've mentioned numerology. Astrology, one of my favorite tools. I do have a astrology book that I'm just coming out with now. It's an update of the basic astrology book I wrote back in the early 80s, and it's called, it's got a new name. It's called Astrology, Art, and Science. It's in the final editing process right now, and you'll be able to pick that up hopefully on the stands by the end of April of this year. So that's coming out soon. Please look for it. But astrology is so close, near and dear to my heart. It's a phenomenal tool for understanding people. Absolutely phenomenal. And let's look at the next slide. I also, in my classes, talk about being able to become aware in your dreams, to wake up in your dreams. That's the first step to lucid dreaming, is waking up in the dream. The next step is taking control of the dream. Now, dream walking is a little bit different. In dream walking, you're actually transferring part of your life force energy through your, they call it the silver cord, that connects your physical and astral body. And in dream walking, this is when the, how many of you have been, out and about, and you could swear you saw somebody, but you know that that person is asleep somewhere. That's called dream walking. It's not, it's that they are not quite physical, but they are so intent on what they're doing that some of their essence came through that silver cord and is actually walking through that store or down that street. And because you were in sort of a daydream state, your eye could see them. They're not quite physical, but you were in the right mode to be able to see them at that point. And that would be dream walking. And that can be a little bit dangerous, because if you put too much of your life force through that cord, it could be debilitating to you. You're not supposed to be physical through that cord. Astral traveling are controlled out-of-body experiences. And I teach my students lucid dreaming first. We do a exercise that's called the Omni Dream Experiment. I came across many, many years ago. I've been working with it ever since, which trains people to become lucid, to become awake in their dreams, and then to take control of their dreams, then to spin the dream and to create motion in the dream. And what this is leading you to is being able to have conscious, controlled, out-of-body experiences. These are natural when you're asleep, and what I'm trying to do is get you to be aware when you're doing them so that it becomes easy when you're awake. And by doing this, I am gradually teaching my students to astral travel. Incidentally, folks, I do have a CD available on astral traveling. It's also available in cassette, and it is excellent. So those of you who aren't taking the classes but you just want to have a key to astral traveling, I've had many, many people write me and say, Sandy, this is the first time in my life I've been able to consciously astral travel is when I worked with your CD. So you know, I'm sharing that with you because it's excellent. It works. Okay. I also want to tell you about my class that's coming up. So let's go to the next slide, please. I told you I was going to be teaching in Tampa at the Sheraton Suites, West Shore. That's going to be on March 23rd and 24th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And it's the Anastasi System of Psychic Development Level 3 Tools and Toys. This class really does stand alone, separate from all of the other classes. I have many people drop in on this class because these are the things they're interested in learning. So even if you haven't taken the first two classes, yes, my class is billed, but this class does stand alone. You will still be able to do everything that's in it, even if you haven't taken those first two classes. You'll have fun with it. So hopefully I'll see some of you there. And if you look at the next slide, here's why you should sign up. Because it gives you, all of my classes give you an ability to develop your intuition in a safe, beautiful, and welcoming environment. I physically protect the space before you ever even enter the classroom. You have an unmatched opportunity to gain experiential hands-on training with me, and I guess I must be world-renowned, huh? You also are going to get to network with other students of all levels of psychic abilities and backgrounds. This is one of the best parts of my classes. Students who go through my classes are still connecting with each other 20 years later. It gives you a peer group that's absolutely wonderful to be able to move through life with. It's just wonderful to have that kind of support. And you can get answers to some of your most burning questions about anything in the metaphysical and psychic development fields. Now I see some more hands that have gone up, and now is definitely the best time because we're getting ready to close. So Lisa, who's got some questions for me?
Okay, the hand I see up right now is Terry's. Terry, you're unmuted.
Hello?
Hello, Terry. I can hear you.
Okay, Sandy. My question is, earlier in the program you said we have different planes of consciousness, the lowest being the physical. Is there any clues or signs that you can tell what level you're on?
Well, first of all, I don't want you to see these as separate things, okay? Your physical body is on that lowest plane, but your emotional body is on the next plane up. Your mental body, the part of you that thinks, is on the next plane up. The part of you that dreams and has these wonderful insights, that's on the next plane after that. And your higher self exists on the plane after that. And a piece of yourself, that a tiny infinitesimal piece that has the ability to connect with your higher guides is on the next plane after that, i.e. a piece of you exists on every single plane all the way going back to God himself or herself or however you see God, the point of origin, okay? So when you say, how do I know which level I'm at, I would interpret that as you're saying which part of myself is dominant at this time. Do you understand what I mean when I say that?
Yes, I understand.
Now, is my physical self dominant? Is my emotional self dominant? Is my higher self dominant? And if I would focus in on that part of yourself that's dominant, maybe I would be able to tell which plane you are operating on most completely. Okay. Also, each one of these planes can be divided down into subplanes. So, mankind, I would see, is one of the on the upper tiers of the physical plane, whereas something like a pebble on the beach might be on one of the lower planes on the physical plane. Do you see?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Did I answer your question?
You did.
I did and I didn't, because you also are still saying, well, how do I know where I'm at spiritually? And, I had that same burning question when I was first starting out. Well, how do I know where I'm at? How do I know where I'm at? And it's the oddest thing, because that probably was one of the things that propelled me personally to study as many things as I've studied. When I was 28 years old and I knew all these different things all the way back then, people were saying to me, Sandy, how can you know so much? And I said, well, I'm searching. What are you searching for? I'm searching for me, really, in all these things I'm studying, and I know you relate. And I want you to know that I still haven't found what level I'm on. But it's been fun. Does that make sense?
It does. It's just confusing at times.
I think you have to just accept that you're wherever you're supposed to be. Dion Fortune, famous author, wrote a book called The Esoteric Philosophy of Love and Marriage. Get that book. It may be out of print. It may be in print. Her books go in and out of print depending on when. I know you can get it through Amazon. Get that book and read it, and I think you're going to find some of your answers in there.
Well, thank you so much.
What she says in that book is that we can always identify the planes of consciousness below us. I know you relate to that. And we can always identify people who are on the plane of consciousness one step above us. But somebody who comes in 2 steps or more above us, we don't recognize them. We can't see them. We might know they're there, but we can't recognize where they're at. Okay, that may be a little bit of a help. But she gives you a lot of information along the path that you're searching in that book. Okay?
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. You're welcome.
You too.
And let me take another question.
Hi again.
Sharon,
Hello again.
Hello.
My question is really an observation, actually. I have been following numerology for years, reading things in numbers. Like, it seems that I have so many coincidences with numbers that they're almost not coincidences. Like a best friend that I have here, her address is 5107. Then I met this woman from my hometown, but I only met her online, and then we started talking. The last 4 digits of her phone number were 5107. Also, I grew up in Cleveland, and the address was 3702. Now, one of my sons moved to Baltimore. I live in Florida. One of my sons moved to Baltimore, and he belonged to an organization. The address was 3702. And I work with a musician whose address is 2703, but I see these same numbers in different combinations, and I know there are only 9 numbers that we deal with anyway.
So how do you interpret that? Because this is your experience. So
I think it's leading me and guiding me to these things, and then it means something. Like, I thought when 5107 came up with the phone number, that was the same address of a best friend of mine. I said, this other girl's going to be my friend, because the numbers were just too odd and familiar.
And has it worked out that way?
Yeah, we've been talking just about every day.
Isn't that nice? Yeah.
Yes. And then my own address, I didn't like the numbers, even though I grew up with 3702. This is 4712, but it adds up to 5, and that is like a number of danger. And I've just had a lot of crazy, not all bad things, but 1 week after I moved in this house, my brother died, you know. So that was not a good feeling, of course. And just a lot of things I just see in numbers. And sometimes I try to shoo it off and say, oh, you know, don't look at it.
It sounds to me from what you're saying that numbers, numerology is one of those fields that happens to really talk to you. And so I would definitely make a point of studying whatever I could get my hands on and learn more and more about it, expand it. And I do agree with you. By the way, my old partner, John Mayers, always said that coincidence is merely a word we use to describe a universal law we do not understand yet.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I'm quoting him. I got to give him credit for it because that's one of the most erudite things I think I've ever heard.
Well, I've even heard Oprah say there are no coincidences. And yeah, there's too many things that are just too coincidental to be, you know, just a little accident. It doesn't seem
absolutely. Yep, and numerology is definitely one of the ways that you can you see this showing up. Another way is just in looking at the world around us and animal totems and insect totems, the world talking to us through what we physically see, and then we look up those things we see, you know, online in a dictionary and say, well, what is the symbolic meaning of this? And it speaks to us, and numbers are speaking to you. So it's very astute that you have recognized that, and it's good for you to follow up on it.
And butterflies, I see a lot of those in my backyard. I feel like, you know, there's something in that too, as well as blackbirds, because blackbirds are the messenger. But my brother used to play that song, Blackbird Singing in the Dead of Night.
So that may be him, or a way that your subconscious is letting you know that he's aware of you. Very cool.
That's it.
Very cool.
It. So those are the things I notice. You know, a lot of the things that you're talking about. You know, I need to go deeper into it. I can see it.
Well, that's what this webinar is intended to do.
Perfect.
Those people who can come to study with me, I want to come. If you can't come, I have all those materials online. You can purchase. I have the free webinar here, and you know, you can go. Thank God we live in a society right now where so much is available. You know, when I started out in 1979, it wasn't. You had to go. You had to overturn mountains to be able to find information. Today, the information is out there. It's most accessible through this way, this internet. Make the best use of it you can, and study, 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 study. It really is about opening your mind and opening and expanding to create the universe the way we know it is. There's more in this unseen world than there is in the seen world. We are evolving, and this is the way to do it. So.
And I thank you so much for doing this for us, because, you know, it helps us to get into further study. You know, by being, I don't know, you're like very down to earth when you explain things, and then
Thank you.
It invites people to want to learn more. It doesn't sound like woo-woo, you know, you're saying it in a very natural way.
Oh, hey, most of my students are you know, they're secretaries, they're lawyers, they're housewives, they're doctors. My students come from all walks of life, but guess what? They all work for a living, you know. So we have lives. We live here in the physical plane, but there's no reason we can't live in the physical plane and also develop those parts of us that live in the higher planes. So.
And do you think, this is another question, do you think that in certain areas of the country it's more concentrated for people that are very intuitive or psychic? Because it seems to me that there are a number of very well-known psychics that come from your area, like New York area.
Well, I started teaching them back in 1979.
Well, you know, one of the highest, John Edward, just sings your praises tremendously.
And I sing his. He's absolutely an amazing man.
Oh my God!
See, I had the luxury of being. I wasn't the first. There were others there before me. I was one of the first people in that area to be teaching and training people. And guess what? All the people I taught and trained went out and taught and trained others, who went out and taught and trained others, who trained others, and it expands. But now that we have the internet, it's no longer going to be in one area exclusively. We've got a whole planet to learn and to teach to. So, hey, I'm going to move on because I want to be able to take one more question. But
Thanks
thank you
so
so
much.
much. Lisa, one more person, please.
Mary, you are unmuted. It's Mary.
Hi, Sandy.
Hello, Mary.
My question, I guess, is more about getting a handle on messages that I receive. As far as, I guess this would be with automatic writing, some concern with that. As I receive some of these messages, you know, my way of been dealing with them has been writing it down. I guess I have a little concern with that. So do you recommend just, you know, like with everything else that you've explained tonight, just doing some extra protection?
Absolutely. You know,
okay.
Mary, if you're moving through the day and your mind is not on automatic writing, you know, you're just doing your ordinary day and you get what I call an incoming. Bam, it's there. That's not something you went out and sought to get. That was information that your higher self or your guides needed you to have. They gave it to you then. Write it down. I do not call that, you know, automatic writing, and that does not need protection, and you weren't at risk. But if you sit down and you say, okay, come on, guides, come on in. I want to do some automatic writing. Now you are reaching out of yourself. You're reaching to something unseen out there. And guess what? I don't care how good you are. You're not going to be good enough that every single time you're going to be able to read that vibration right and make sure that you don't have an imposter. So if you find yourself consciously sitting down, now's my hour, I'm going to do my automatic writing, you must protect. Okay?
Okay, so when you're getting a message that's coming from someone else, or like say it's just from someone that you have no idea, like even from another country, whatever, that's not what you consider automatic writing.
No.
That's just, okay, so that's totally different. It's
Well,
when you consciously are trying to get information on someone, then, or some, that's what you consider automatic, or what you're...
Right. Well, first of all, you know, we're talking about, you know, writing. Writing's kind of a conscious thing. You're going to pick up the pen, you hold it over the paper, okay? If I'm going to pick up the pen and hold it over the paper to do my automatic writing and say, okay, guys, what do you have to tell me now? That's pretty obvious. That's a, you know, that is a concerted effort to open up to the other side and let them come through and give me a message. I need to be protected fully when I do that, okay?
Okay.
If I am, you know, if I'm sitting here at my computer typing away, writing my book, okay, and this is not automatic writing. When I write, I do sometimes get inspired writing, but I write my books, okay? So say I'm writing my book and it's either me or it's inspired, and all of a sudden I get this super duper incoming zoom, okay? Well, I didn't need protection when I got that because my attention was pretty focused on my writing already. That incoming was a one-liner, and it didn't keep going on, and I didn't seek it. I can be pretty sure that was safe. Do you understand where I'm coming? You see?
Okay. All right.
Okay?
All right. I understand the
we're
difference.
seeking to go out and bring something in that we really are at risk. Okay?
All right. Can I ask just one more question?
You sure can.
Okay. So say you get information about somebody because you weren't expecting it. You were doing something else. They give you this information. So now you've got this. Now you want to go after this information.
Now you need the protection. Yes.
Now you need the protection.
Right.
Okay.
Because
Thank you.
We could be getting. We could be getting somebody, here you are, you're doing your thing, and you get this, you know, one-liner about another person. That could be the hook of something on the other side that just wants to draw you in to feed your emotion so that it can use you as a battery. Okay? So, you boy, if you're going to go after that, you super-duper need protection. Okay?
Right. Yep.
And
no, I understand.
And if that incoming you got was a very emotional incoming, even if that one-liner incoming, that was a real doozy of an incoming, well, I would protect, and I'd go back in and I'd ask the same question just to make sure I got the same answer.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Then I know. Yeah. Do I sound super suspicious, you guys? I have evolved an extremely suspicious nature because of having been a public figure for a good part of my life. and owned a New Age store, as well as having been involved with, you know, many people who are well known, including John, I have attracted over the years, you know, some both entities from the other side and entities from this side who weren't such nice people. So I have learned over the years to use a lot of protection and a lot of discretion, and to not just trust everything I hear. I always protect, and then I put it to the test. Okay? I do my homework. I double check to make sure if something is true before I leap to a conclusion. And I really encourage all of my students to do that too. I think it will make you much, much better psychics, and it will make you much healthier people also. Mary, thank you so much for asking those questions. They were really, really good ones.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Before I let you go, Mary, I want to tell you one other thing. When we're doing our automatic writing is one of those tools where we have the ability to really reach very, very high up those planes. So when somebody has the skill to really connect with those higher guides, they're going to work very hard to work with you, because there is some information that can come from those higher planes that's not available to us on planet Earth right now. And you know, that information is not about your mother, your brother, your sister. You know, that's the information that's about, you know, a new invention's happening that's going to save the world. You know, that's information that's coming from a much higher level. And it's one of the things I love about automatic writing. When we're really protected and we have meditated first so that we're in a really nice, solid state of balance, we can really reach up those planes and bring through some amazing things. So, and Mary, I think you're one of those people who could do that.
Oh.
Tall order, huh?
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And I think I've got barely time for one more question if we're really fast. What do you think, Lisa?
I think I don't see any hands up. I think everybody's just soaking it all in.
Okay. See, I see on my computer here, I've got a little question mark. And I probably am just looking at one that was already answered. Okay, folks. It has been wonderful. Let's look at the next slide here. If you want to know more about me, go to www.sandyanastasi.com. I have all my classes on my website, classes in psychic development and astrology and numerology, and the list goes on. All the things that we've talked about tonight are on there. When my upcoming appearances are, when more webinars like this are, certainly the ability to sign up for my newsletter. If you get my newsletter, you'll always find out about these things. My Facebook page is on there. Where you can find me on LinkedIn is on there. And please get involved with my Facebook. We do connect. We have a very active community there. Come and see me on my chat rooms. We meet every other Wednesday. We have a very active chat room. And I've got tons of stuff coming up, too numerous really to go over right now. But please go to my site frequently, check out what's coming up. And I love you all. I'm glad you made it tonight. It was so great to see everybody here. So hopefully I'll see a bunch of you in Tampa coming up soon. If not, I'll see you again online right here, hopefully next month when we do another webinar for a Psychic Development Level 4. Good night.